Organized team activities for the Broncos are behind us, and mandatory minicamp is here. Will it look basically the same? Yeah, it will. But one's voluntary, one's mandatory, and it is yet another step toward the training camp and the conclusion of this offseason as we head into the 2025-2026 NFL season. So with minicamp beginning today over at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit, there's a lot of questions to be asked about what the makeup of this Denver Broncos team is going to look like and how each new addition is going to fit into Sean Payton's puzzle. How will the running back reps be divvied up? Is RJ Harvey prepared and capable of being a true lead back in this offense as the resurgence of the running back position continues to rise? Who's going to be the number 2 wide receiver? Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, newcomer Pat Bryant, Marvin Mims, maybe Evan Ingram as the Joker. And speaking of the Joker, what does that role look like? We've done so much talking and speculating about what's missing from Sean Payton's offense. He's told us about this Joker role, but what's it going to look like for the orange and blue in 2025? All things to come on today's rundown, but we will begin with what I think is probably the most intriguing part offensively for this Broncos offense, and that is the running back position. Javonte Williams is out. RJ Harvey is in. Audric Estime seems to have been in, then out, and now back in again in terms of favorability with Sean Payton after being drafted in the 5th round last year. And Jaleel McLaughlin continues to show just glimpses of that speed and that flashy playmaking ability that we just couldn't find enough consistency for, and that he wasn't able to capitalize enough on during his tenure and his time last season to be able to try to carve out a lead back role for himself in this offense. Well, the rubber's getting close to meeting the road here for the Broncos. RJ Harvey thus far in organized team activities has been used prevalently as a runner and as a receiver in the screen game and the passing game. Still sounds like he's going to need some improvement and some work in the pass protection area, which is part of what Javonte Williams excelled at so well and what kept him as a key part of the offense, despite how ineffective he was as a runner. So RJ Harvey seems to be kind of a leader in the clubhouse to be that lead back. And then it's down to Audric Estime, the bigger bodied back out of Notre Dame, who Sean Payton clearly valued and targeted as a 5th round pick in last year's draft. A guy who dealt with injuries and ball security issues during his early tenure of his rookie season, but was getting meaningful snaps and carries in gotta-have-it game-closing situations against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road in Arrowhead, and then finishes the season not even getting a jersey for the playoff game against Buffalo. So just a roller coaster first year for Audric Estime. But in this offseason, during these organized team activities, his coach, Sean Payton, has gone on the record and said that Estime is a guy who needs to be fed and needs those carries to get going. And he's, quote, going to get those opportunities, end quote. So Audric Estime, if we're judging the in-out scale, he loves me not, on the rose petals. Right now, Sean Payton is in the loves me camp for Audric Estime. And then that leaves Jaleel McLaughlin to try to carve out an opportunity and a role that supplements those 2 other pieces. Somebody's likely going to end up being the odd man out. The question is who and when does that take shape? And that doesn't even begin to factor in the wild card in this scenario, which is the potential for a J.K. Dobbins signing, which would push the Audric Estimes and the Jaleel McLaughlins a little bit more toward the fringes, and the Tyler Badets and the Blake Watsons, who are fighting just for a chance to get off the practice squad and be a part of that group, who's likely going to carry probably 3 running backs into the regular season. It's going to push them even further beyond the fringes of that room and in this offense. J.K. Dobbins left the Broncos facility after a 2-day visit without a deal, but as our guy Mike Kliss reported, is still on the radar and in conversations with the Denver Broncos. Kliss said to myself and Mike Evans on the morning show this morning that the Broncos did try to sign, at least he thinks they did try to sign J.K. Dobbins right then and there when he was in the facility, following suit with the idea that when you bring a guy in for a visit, you don't want to let him leave without a deal. But whether it's J.K. Dobbins' camp being unhappy with the number and the Broncos coming in too low, or J.K. Dobbins just wanting to play the field a little bit longer and test the waters a little bit deeper, knowing that he has an opportunity to return to the Chargers for the tune of about $3 million. Whatever the reason may be, they didn't work out a deal yet. But time still remains for them to be able to do that. And I think that the fact Sean Payton and George Payton brought J.K. Dobbins in for a visit and that Dobbins accepted that visit means there's mutual interest on both sides for something like that to happen. As the running back room sits right now, here's kind of where I see it heading into mandatory minicamp. I do think that RJ Harvey, the second-round draft pick out of UCF, who the Broncos traded back twice in the second round before acquiring, I do think that despite the fact that they passed on a running back in Omarion Hampton or Travion Henderson or Quinshad Judkins in the first round for Za'Dar Barron, and despite the fact they didn't trade up on day 2 in the second round to acquire a running back like Travion Henderson or Quinshad Judkins, I do think that RJ Harvey is going to be relied upon to be the bulk carrier in this offense to eat up the majority of the touches and the opportunities that were presented to Javonte Williams, both as a rusher and as a receiver right now. I do think RJ Harvey is going to be trusted with that mantle and that role right away. If they bring in a J.K. Dobbins or another veteran running back, maybe that changes. And then it's going to come down to Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime. Jaleel McLaughlin as a change of pace back and a speed back and a use of a screen game guy out of the backfield does present some opportunity with his given skill set, despite perhaps some physical limitations from a size perspective. Audric Estime has the bigger body. He's about 215, 220, and a little bit more of that bruiser, wrecking ball type running back like he was at Notre Dame. Presents perfectly for him to be the leader in the clubhouse as a third down back and a pass protector, somebody that's stout enough to be able to take on a blitzing linebacker who's coming to tear off Bo Nix's head. So I think that that's probably the pecking order. RJ Harvey, Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin, as I see the running back room right now, with fringe guys like Bidet and Blake Watson, who've shown some playmaking ability in their own right, just fighting for an opportunity in case of injury or perhaps roster shakeup that they can slot in on the bottom end of that room. When it comes to the receiver position, I think this is going to be a fascinating revolving door and rotation for these pass catchers, all slotted in behind Courtland Sutton, who is the de facto number 1 receiver in this offense. Would he be a wide receiver 1 in every other offense around the league? No, probably not. He's probably closer to a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1, but he's produced pretty well with just about every quarterback that he's played with, and he's had an unfair revolving door and rotation of quarterbacks in his career as a Denver Bronco dating back to 2018. But slotting on the other side of Courtland Sutton at the number 2 wide receiver position, I think it's fairly wide open as to who could be lining up in that spot on week 1, play 1 for the Broncos offensively. I think that Marvin Mims makes an opportunity or a case to be able to take that opportunity, although he doesn't necessarily profile as a true wide receiver 2. I think from an archetype standpoint and a physical skill set standpoint, that leans more toward like a Devon Vele, who was built in that Tim Patrick mold. And then you have other guys like Troy Franklin, who proved to be kind of a speed guy, a gadget guy, take the top off, that Marvin Mims excelled at so well as he took another step in that offense. Or is it the newcomer, Pat Bryant, another big-bodied wide receiver out of Illinois, who Zach Bye and others have called the potential future of the Denver Broncos at the wide receiver position is embodied in their minds in Pat Bryant. So could the rookie show enough flashes and enough substance and enough connectivity with Bo Nix in the early part of these mini camp sessions to be able to put his name in the hat to be wide receiver 2 next to Courtland Sutton? It's possible if I was to, just like I did with the running back room, give a pecking order for the wide receiver 2 slot. I would probably put it at Devon Vele 1, Marvin Mims 2A, Pat Bryant 2B, because I think that Pat Bryant presents more of the body type and the skill set to profile as a wide receiver 2 than Marvin Mims, but Marvin Mims has the pelts on the wall compared to Pat Bryant. And then a Troy Franklin down below that, although that sets up Troy Franklin to potentially be the biggest breakout candidate for the Denver Broncos at the receiver position. There also exists the possibility that the Joker, Evan Ingram, is the number 2 wide receiver by volume in this offense. And that's just going to depend on how Sean Payton decides to use the Joker and what that actually looks like. We have talked ad nauseum in Sean Payton's 2 years and change here as the head coach of the Denver Broncos about what that role looks like. We've seen it manifest itself several different ways during Sean Payton's time in New Orleans, from the likes of a Jimmy Graham or a Jeremy Shockey at the tight end position to a Michael Thomas at the wide receiver position, to be able to just carve and eat up the middle of the field with slant routes and intermediate routes. And then from the running back position, a guy like Darren Sproles, a guy like Alvin Kamara, a guy like Reggie Bush, all players that have served that Joker type role in the offense, that piece on the chessboard that Sean Payton can move around at will and deploy at whatever is most advantageous for that drive, for that game, for that week, etc. And if I'm trying to visualize it right now, what I visualize with Evan Ingram specifically in the Joker role is something closer along the lines to like a Rob Gronkowski type of tight end role, a Travis Kelce-esque type of tight end role, in a sense that not necessarily from a physical or a body perspective, but somebody who's going to be able to line up in the slot at the tight end position or be moved around to other sides of the field and maybe allow Marvin Mims to cheat inside if Evan Ingram lines up in line as a tight end, and you can move him around, and he's going to target heavily the middle of the field to exploit linebacker mismatches and give Bo Nix a safety valve down the field that doesn't make him have to resort to a running back screen and or a wide receiver bubble screen type of immediate passing play. And what the production may look like, what it should look like, I think depends on the productivity of other areas of the offense. So even though the Joker is this magical piece that I think is supposed to make all these parts of Sean Payton's offense fit together, I do think that the success or failure of that role and the usage rate and the connection between Bo Nix and Evan Ingram depends on the success or failure of the running game, the rushing offense, and whether or not those 3 backs collectively as a stable and as a room can balance out the offense to a degree that doesn't allow the defense to just key off on the passing game the way they were able to for large stretches of this past year. I think it also depends on the capability and the ability and the productivity of the wide receivers split outside of a guy like Evan Ingram. If Courtland Sutton continues to be a flirt with 1,000-yard and 8 to 10 touchdown type of guy, that's going to require a vacuum of touches. If Marvin Mims continues to develop and take another step as an inline speed receiver to take the top off the way he did against the Cleveland Browns, the way Troy Franklin did against the Buffalo Bills, scoring the Broncos' only touchdown, and Devon Vele, who seemed to be that Tim Patrick archetype that he was drafted to be, in that sturdy-handed, trusty, reliable wide receiver who produced at a level that a 7th-round pick in a rookie season like Devon Vele did is pretty rare. So Devon Vele, coming off of a season that historically speaking from that perspective is very uncommon, is he going to take another step? How do all of these touches cannibalize each other for a guy like Bo Nix, who can only throw the ball so much, and in a perfect world maybe is throwing the ball less because of the dominance and the success of the rushing attack? So many questions and things to be answered, and they're not all going to be answered in this coming week of minicamp practices that'll wrap up likely on Thursday morning. But this is going to be one of the best first opportunities for us to really start to see what things look like. Is it going to be anything insane from a contact perspective? No. It's going to be closer to two-hand touch than that. But the further we get into the summer and the closer we get to training camp, which is where the gloves will really come off and things will really start to come together and meld visually for what we're going to expect on both sides of the ball, I think that this is going to be the precursor. This is the prologue to that story, and it'll be interesting to see and give us some notions heading into training camp about what to expect. And we didn't even begin to touch on the defensive side of the ball, things that we want to talk about and things that we want to see and expect at a minicamp, which is where we will pick up on tomorrow's show starting at noon. Thank you all so much for joining me. This has been The Rundown. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at DenverSports1043. Follow us on X or Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at DEN Sports 1043. Check out everything that our guys like Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason, Will Peterson, Jake Shapiro, Trent Finnegan, and so many more have pumping out content-wise for you at DenverSports.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the Broncos, the Nuggets, the Avalanche, the Rockies, the Buffs, whatever sports news and information you have a desire for here in the state of Colorado, we have it here for you at DenverSports.com. So give it a check out there, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon.